I'm Nicholas Kuhner, founder of Wunderbrand, and we're going to deep dive into the world of branding, digital marketing, and entrepreneurship. My career includes working with some of the world's top brand and advertising agencies, as well as working at brands like Nando's, MTV, and Comedy Central, where for 20 years I've honed my expertise in building brands in emerging markets. Based here in Oslo, I lecture on digital marketing, helping the next generation of marketers navigate this dynamic world. I'm here to share powerful insights from my own journey and bring you the wisdom of leading voices in branding and marketing from across the globe. Whether you're an entrepreneur looking to scale, a student eager to learn, or a business seeking to elevate your brand, you're in the right place. So let's get going. Colin Kingsmill, he believes that we've lost touch with our shared humanity and have become distracted by division, identity politics, negative news cycles, corporate and special interests, greed, and forces that try and crush our souls and keep us from being healthy and thriving. And I do think that is very true of today's time. So your mission is to help people rediscover their humanity, live in integrity, be fearless, and become free from the suffering that is holding you down. That's not any small feat, so we're going to touch on some of those. But first of all, welcome to you and your dog.
Thank you very much. She's sitting here patiently waiting for me to take her out again.
So we are going to talk a little bit about building an authentic brand and authentic brand promise. And perhaps let's just go into, you've done sales and you can sell things. You've also been in banking, and from a high level, what kind of triggers high level individuals are looking for? And it's not just cash money, because at a stage, once you've got enough money is just money. It's cachet, it's power, it's all these other things. How important has branding been in the kind of work that you've been doing? And maybe just explain some of the work that you've done, which involves branding with super yachts and expensive housing developments and so on.
Sure. And I think we have to contextualize it over a time frame too, right? When I first started getting into this business 20 or 25 years ago, more now on the banking side, but you used to be able to go out and sell something with a pretty flimsy story, right? Or a pretty light story. The language was similar to everybody else's, and people fell for it. They accepted that superficial approach to them from a sales and marketing perspective or from a branding perspective. And I think what's happened, and maybe it's due to social media and the internet and the age of knowledge ever so increasing, and now it's increasing exponentially with AI. But I think people just started to look at what we were doing in the marketing world and the branding world and go, you know what? That just doesn't resonate with me anymore. That's meaningless. So I started to ask, how do you connect with an audience today that is hyper distracted? How do you connect with an audience today that doesn't believe half of what you're saying, or didn't in the past anyway? So all of these questions started to bubble up in my mind recently. And it was really all about, the last 20 years have been about storytelling, right? And everything's a story and all that. But even that, people began to feel not bitter about, but just didn't really believe it anymore. So my work was to dive deeper and deeper and farther into what it meant. Like, what are you really selling? I felt this need to dive deeper into how you speak to people and how you relate to people, and that companies that were not selling a deep message, not selling a deep conversation, not selling or talking to you as an adult. I felt as though so many marketing agencies were treating people like dummies, and people seemed to fall for it, but fell for it less and less. That's where I began to dive into, what are you really saying? Why are you really saying it? Why does it matter? Where does it come from? What's the provenance? What are all the details that will make your story, your message, more authentic? So I guess one good example was when we went to Montenegro, and a Canadian investor said, I want to build a super yacht marina here. Okay. And he wanted to build a super yacht marina on an ex-naval base in a post-communist emerging market that was still hard to get to, nobody knew about, and didn't have any quote unquote luxury provenance or history. It had a bit of cachet in the 50s and 60s, but other than that, there was nothing there. So that was where I had to really dive into the nitty gritty of it all. Like, how do you overcome these hurdles? I'm going on and on now and not answering your question appropriately.
Well, I mean, that must have been a fun project, because if I think Montenegro, if you think we can just do, if we relate it to St. Bart's in the olden, if we talk about the olden days, St. Bart's is where everyone hung out, and
sure.
there wasn't anything exciting there. And that was mosquito infested. It was a place where the hoi polloi couldn't basically get to. Montenegro, yeah.
The hoi polloi could get to Montenegro if they wanted to drive around. And the thing also with placemaking or destinations, we're going a little bit off piste, but some places have evolved over 50 years. And somewhere St. Bart's has evolved over years and years. And its growth was natural, right? But so often in sales and marketing, a developer or somebody with a luxury product or somebody with something else to sell or promote wants much more immediate responses. And that's why I believe that it's so important for businesses today and individuals today to really have a deep and thoughtful brand promise, right? What are you really bringing to the world? What is the why? So many people, even here locally, I've seen projects which, okay, they're interesting, but the answer to the why is, I just want to make some money. And I think a lot of people today in this age of knowledge and this age of the internet that we live in can smell that from a long way away. And if you are doing something and the destination is purely, I want to earn X, Y, Z, I think people can tell. So I don't want to get metaphysical on us, but there's a certain energy to doing something with authenticity and with integrity. Yeah.
I think, why we need to bring monarchies back, because monarchies had a long-term vision. You weren't changing every 5 years. And you talk about that these destinations took 50 years or a certain period of time to grow.
Sure.
And that's the same thing with us as personal brands. Your personal brand isn't grown in 6 months. You cannot grow. Maybe you can, if you blow up somewhere with some interesting stunt or a sex tape, you can blow up somewhere. But in terms of building your personal brand, that takes years and years and years. And if you want it to be a personal brand that has longevity and has value and has actual meaning, people have got to believe it. You can't just say, first time I meet Colin, you are the world's best coach ever.
Sure.
And I just tell everyone that. They're going to look at your website. They're going to go look at your LinkedIn. They're going to look at Instagram. They're going to look at articles. They're going to see how long has he been a coach. And brands are a guarantee of a certain type of delivery, basically. And that promise is built over a period of time. So I want to go back to where we started meandering, and that is on how do you create an authentic brand? How in coaching, you obviously deal with this in terms of trying to get to somebody's authentic self and trying to extract out of somebody what is meaningful for them. Because very often in brands and personal branding, it's not the most obvious thing that you think about.
No,
it's the
it's
most
not.
important thing. So tell us maybe a little bit about your process of finding this authentic self.
Sure. So my process is quite simple for me, but it's hard for the person that's on the other side of the table, because I'll give you an example of somebody that I'm working with who has a great business. It's all positive, does a lot. There's a lot of modalities and offerings in the business, but there was lacking this, what are you really, right? And so sitting down with somebody like that, or any of my clients, in one case there was a business in London that was in luxury retail, and it took 3 months between the two partners for me to tease out of them what their business was. And they've been operating for 7 years at the time.
Because that takes trust, right?
It takes trust. So I guess that's where the coaching aspect comes in. So the first thing to do is to bring people into a safe space, right? A confidential, non-judgmental, nothing's going to break. There's nothing wrong with you. And let's start in that space, right? So you start in a very solid, kind of solid room. And I keep asking the why. What are you really doing? Why does it really matter? Why will it matter in 10 years? What is in this for you? What do you want your legacy to be? What are you really doing for humanity, right? Or for the planet or for your target audience? And so often people will stop at that barrier of, I provide this and this service. And then I'm sure you run into this too in marketing and branding. They say what they do, but they have a hard time understanding why, right? And if it's all about the money, then the business doesn't have, I don't think, those legs to go that distance that you and I were speaking about in terms of creating that longevity. It's really come to a safe space, and then let's dive deep into why you're actually doing this. What do you want to change in your industry? What do you want to be? Well, one of my questions is, what do you want to be the home of, right? And it's, oh, but I've got a car detailing business. Okay, then no problem. What does that mean? What are you the home of, and how will you expand your product line? So maybe in that instance, you're the home of, I don't know, effortless order. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But it's really a question of pushing people farther than they've probably ever gone in understanding who they are and what they're doing. And those are tough questions because sometimes a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to start up a luxury watch business, or I'm going to run a business selling, I don't know, healthcare services, or doesn't really matter, the car detailing guy or the yacht broker. It doesn't matter what business you're in. What really matters is understanding that who you are and why you're doing this. And then the next step is, all right, let's talk about the expression of who you are. Because going back to where we started, I believe that a lot of people going through the motions, right? And going through the motions means, oh, I have to do these amounts of posts a day. I've got to do this social media. I've got to post 3 times a day on X, Y, or Z. Doesn't matter. But there's nothing to it. It's vacuous and it's empty and it's just mechanical, right? So what I try and work with people is, well, okay, we figured out who you are and why you're doing this, right? And we can begin to create what I call a brand promise. And a brand promise is, what are you promising to the world with whatever you're doing? Okay. And once you articulate the brand promise, let's start to articulate the expression of that promise through some storytelling lenses that might be, maybe you have 3 or 4 pillars that are the lenses through which you tell your authentic story. But you don't tell it, or you can't tell it, I don't think, unless you have a journey to speak about, a promise to speak about, what your values and attributes are, the basics of brand guidelines. But it's like brand guidelines with a commitment, like a soulful commitment. Because I think in the world that we live in today, and you can see it a little bit on places like LinkedIn, where there's so much broadcasting, right? There's so much pushing out. And most of it is not saying too much. So I say to people, let's make sure that the expression of you, who you are, and that storytelling, again, it has legs and is as in depth as the promise and the commitment that you've worked on with me. So those are the 3 steps. It's get you to a safe space and this is why I think sometimes a marketing agency might not feel like that space that you can do it. So my idea is, let's create a safe space. And that safe space might be like a bit of a tumbling match, right? Like it might not be, you might come out feeling a little bruised, but you're not going to be judged and you're not going to be critiqued or anything like that. But what will come out of it is a better version of your story to tell the world in that commitment. So yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Lots of people struggle to obviously get to that point, and I've seen it with a lot of businesses who just don't care. They're just interested in making money. I don't care about all of this backstory stuff. I just need to drive this amount of profit. So
Sure.
And that is perfectly okay as well. And
Fill your
unfortunately,
boots.
very often those guys who are focused on the cash are generally the ones, are quite often the ones who are successful because they are just very focused on one thing. And I think it's very easy for people who've got vision and people who've got ideas to
Hmm.
to go down a whole bunch of different rabbit holes and not choose one thing, because I'm sure, and I've seen in your background as well, you're capable of doing a whole bunch of things. I see you were a
Mm,
creative director, you're in sales,
sure.
you're in banking. There's a whole bunch of things that you've done.
Hmm.
Getting somebody to choose, because you can't be, there are not many Michelangelos and Leonardos out there who are polymaths, who can do a multitude of
Mm,
things. The
sure.
majority of us need to stick at one thing.
Sure.
How difficult is it getting to that point of maturity, or in these discussions, to get somebody to focus on one thing to the exclusion of everything else?
That's a great question because we live in this era in 2024 of hyper distraction, lack of focus, the increase in things like attention deficit disorders, mental health challenges, and not being able to focus, not being able to see straight. That is a real challenge. Now, I do say to people that might have a bit of a problem narrowing down and focusing on something, that having a portfolio career is fine, right? You can have multiple things going on at the same time, but you have to have depth of character in each one of those, right? So choose wisely, okay? And I really do promote the idea of meditation and mindfulness to make sure that you can wake up in the morning with some clarity, right? So I've got clients that wake up in the morning and they did in the past anyway, spin out of control in 5 minutes because there's to-do lists and post-its everywhere. And I think that's just a byproduct of the society that we live in today. So to counterbalance that, for me, it's let's get mindful, let's narrow things down, practice meditation, make sure you're physically fit. That's why we created whole human coaching, right? To look at people more holistically, right? That client of mine that might be spinning out of control or might have been spinning out of control in the past with multiple projects and thousands of to-do lists, if you look into kind of the coaching side of things, there in that instance, there was early childhood development trauma that created this core wound of unworthiness. So often, this lack of focus that you're speaking about is a compensation mechanism to something else. Ideally, if somebody's in that sort of lack of focus space, maybe we should have another conversation about what is the origin story of that lack of focus. Okay, because it doesn't have to be like that. So it's a complicated question. I think we could talk all for an hour on that, something like that.
We could. My follow up to that, because I had my list of interesting questions here for you, is what does meaning mean to you in a post religious world, and what's its replacement? And in terms of the role of coaches, because it does seem like you're doing the role that traditional parish priests used to do.
Mm-hmm.
You'd speak to somebody, keep them in line. But since none of us most don't believe in God anymore, that whole role, the whole point of that person, and obviously priests in a Christian sense weren't the first priests. They were obviously holy people and
Sure, for
spiritual
sure.
people before that, guiding
Yep.
people because they needed it. So this is just a continuation on that. But that's perhaps a discussion for another podcast.
Yeah.
What
I
other,
mean,
what
go ahead. Next time.
Yeah. What I wanted
Good
to
question.
talk to you about is, you're obviously focusing on executives and people who are either successful or trying to be successful or have been
Mm,
successful and need to get their mojo back. But
mm,
I had a very interesting interview last week with a guest where we were talking about the importance of getting your children globalized and networking sooner rather than later. So starting at a
sure.
younger age, in terms of languages, in terms of if
Mm.
you move to countries, learning, sending the kids to different schools, etc. Do you think this process that you're doing could be useful for a younger generation? Because a gift I'd like to give to my children is for them to leapfrog 20 years worth of networking and 20 years worth of angst
Yep.
and have to and avoid that is value I can give them versus sending them to university where they'll learn the same junk as everybody else. So
Yeah,
is
hopefully,
how
maybe.
is that something that you potentially could think about, or has it ever cropped up?
Oh, look, I love working with youth. So I've worked with a lot of people that have been in university and getting close to that moment of leaving university. I think it's again, what a super question. I think it's mission critical that we focus on our youth and on children. And if you just look at the data in North America, children and youth today are the most sick from a mental health perspective. They're also getting the most medication and the most therapy. So something is telling me that our society is broken, right? Or at a minimum, it is sick. And the young people of today, I think, are bearing the brunt of that, right? So you combine all of these things, and at least over here, probably less where you are in Europe, the food supply is not the greatest, right? It's not, for me, it's not food. So you have a whole generation of people growing up right now that are absolutely lost. And I've worked with lots of young people and I love it. I should do more of it. Actually, that's a nice call to action. It's a
Mm.
good one.
I think, I've worked with and presented to organizations like the Young Presidents Organization, and they would have, for example, conferences around the world. And it's
Yep.
not just the parents, so the father or the mother who've been successful in life. The kids come along on that too, and they are
Yep.
involved in some of the exercises, and that's how you grow wealth, that's how you maintain, that's how you build family legacy in terms of exposing children to these things early on. And it's
I
not just
agree.
about money making, it was about, like you said, meditation, yoga, insightful talks about motivation and that. So folks
Well,
who are generating wealth aren't talking about money all day. It's about these things that go around it in order to, once you've got it, how do you maintain it, which I think is
totally.
the other difficult thing about wealth management.
So a couple of things. I mean, for youth and kids, I think they also require. I think it would be beneficial to them to have better sense making mechanisms. Right. You and I are. I don't know how old you are, but we're mature adults, and I do a lot of kind of looking up and going, okay, what are the mega trends? What is happening geopolitically? What is happening demographically? What are the macroeconomics of these situations? Because if you look down into the day to day, it looks like we are at end of empire days, right? It's a lot of chaos around us. And I think you would add sense making into that for kids and youth. Moving on to the preservation of wealth, I'm I'm reading a book right now called Love Money Loves You. Okay. And it's by a woman named Sarah McCrum. And it's written in the voice of money, in the voice of the energy of money speaking to you. I've read and listened to and watched a lot of that sort of law of attraction thing and abundance and creation of abundance, Bob Proctor and Joe Dispenza and Esther Hicks, all of these people. This is a really interesting one because she ties it all together. And Lynn Twist 20 years ago wrote a book called The Soul of Money, which was brilliant. But this book kind of ties all of those teachings together into a new way of having a relationship with money and and changing your dialogue with money. So I think to answer your question on the preservation of money, it's really about it's really about connecting to, I think now anyway, connecting to your relationship and your language with it. And Lynn Twist said 20 years ago that money is like a river and it needs to flow through you. And if you allow it to flow as opposed to blocking it, you will always have it. So to me, that is the preservation of wealth, is allowing that flow. If I was still an asset manager at UBS, I would not be saying that, but let it
Yeah,
flow, man.
I know we started off with branding and so on, and
Yes.
I see you've got a whole bunch of businesses here. You've got Colin, you've got Kalo, you've got
Right.
what else here? A whole bunch of businesses. Tell me, what is your big focus now?
So the big focus now is really whole human coaching. And the idea around that business is to change the paradigm of coaching, or to change the way people to change the world of coaching, right? So we're calling it Coaching Reimagined. And I know that might sound a little bit pokey, but we believe that coaching and leadership development no longer reflects the complexity of our times. We believe that it was based on the paradigms of success of the last 50 or 60 years, which were have more, get more, do more, climb the ladder, performance evaluations, 10x, all ROI and all these things. And it was very sort of sports-based coaching and leadership development. But what we've seen in the last decade or so is that people are coming, and it's accelerating, okay? People are coming into a coaching session or coming into a leadership development session, and it feels as though we've been it feels as though we're working in an emergency room situation, right? They come in, you do a triage, and they leave, and they go back out into insanity. And so we just believe that coaching and leadership development needs to change, and it needs to become more holistic. So looking at individuals from a whole and letting go of the old paradigms of success and performance and structure and leadership. So we really want to shake up the world that way. I'm just a practitioner on Kalo. I was a strategic advisor to them for a while, and they are changing the face of healthcare and medicine, right? So they're looking at bridging ancient wisdom to modern science. So that's really all I'm doing. I want to start a movement called Enough Already, and that's connected to this idea of if we remember our humanity in each of us, and if we live in integrity and work in integrity, that is, be yourself, okay, shed the clenches of fear and guilt and all the emotional other pieces of that puzzle, you can become free. And free from psychological suffering, not free by waving a flag around, right? And if you're free from psychological suffering, what are the possibilities? That's my thing. Whole human coaching, and enough already. Let's make this world a better place. That's it.
What better brand positioning than make the world a better place? So that's a great place to start, and I'd suggest all people look at having that at least as an item they can tick off on their brand on a page. Colin, it's been great.
Yes.
I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to drill down into one of these areas a little bit more deeply, because we've been bouncing around, and sure. I can see you've got mountains of knowledge and experience in these areas. So perhaps it's worth us talking about those at a later stage. But this has been
sure.
a great primer into Colin, and I look forward to learning more about your movement and a little bit more about your coaching.
Yeah. Right now or in the next time we meet together?
That was a segue into, thank you, Nicholas. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Nicholas. I thought no worries. I'm also a dork.
Make that obvious enough, yeah.
I'm also a dork. Yeah, thank you very much. It's been great being here. I'd love to come back. I feel like you and I could talk all day for some reason.
Absolutely.
Something's there.
So,
all right. Thank you.
To protect our audience, we'll end it here. But definitely You're going to be hearing more from Colin. So again, thanks a lot and have a great day.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. Take care.